Independent financial advisors are the backbone of Europe's wealth landscape. But in a market defined by new regulations, rising client expectations, and the arrival of agentic AI, how can IFAs build businesses that are both resilient and client-centric? That's exactly what we'll explore today. Hi, and welcome to Wealth Insider, a podcast by Performative. This is where industry meets insight, where we sit down for honest and engaging conversations with voices from every corner of the financial world. Together, we explore trends, strategies, and partnerships that are shaping the future of wealth management. Wealth Insider brings you closer to the people and the ideas that are driving the industry forward. Hi, and welcome back to the Wealth Insider. I'm your host, Christian Lindvall, Global Commercial Director at Performative. And today, I'm joined by Koen Vanderhoydonk, CEO of The Connector, and perhaps one of the most connected and well-traveled people within the European fintech ecosystem. Koen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, and what an introduction. I feel the pressure.
Yes, I think you should now. Yes, so we're well acquainted. We know each other, but maybe a good place to start is who's The Connector and why did you start the company?
That's a very good question. So I guess I'll start with why did we start the company? Because I was scaling myself. I worked in the financial industry virtually my whole career and then started scaling, and I realized how complex scaling is. And I wanted to find answers for that. And when I look around me, like large companies out of the US, when they scaled in Europe, they hired the best people in every city they needed. And not one, but three. And that's what I wanted to mimic, but without that major budget. So that's why we created a fractional sales team. So people that are on the ground that can be used on a fractional basis. Now, fast forward to today, we do a lot more than that. We also do a lot around branding and marketing, and we realized that it takes two to tango in order to be successful.
Absolutely. And the nice thing for us is, as you're in person here in Copenhagen, but specifically for Nordic Fintech Week.
Yep.
So I'm keen to hear how that was this year, how it compared to maybe last year, other years that you've attended.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was majestic, as always. It's a very well-organized event. It's also very well attended, and what I mean by that, it's not only the fintech ecosystem, but also all the other financial players like the buy side. And I think you need, again, two sides of the coin to be there, because otherwise you don't have that sort of momentum that everyone wants. That's one thing. The other thing is that they always succeed to have very good and insightful content. So this year it was around how important humans are in our industry, so human connections. And that was obviously a topic that is close to my heart. Then
maybe I'm curious, because you are so well traveled, as we said in the intro. You're traveling a lot. I know we text and you're in some new city all the time. So I guess when you go to other shows like Nordic Fintech Week, how does Nordic Fintech Week in particular compare to the other ones that you experience throughout the year?
I would say it's in my top 5, especially when I look at European events. As I said, well organized, but it's really the ecosystem that makes the difference. And that's not only this event, which is obviously the pinnacle point of the year, but it's also the fact that Copenhagen Fintech is just very well connected, has a very strong ecosystem with good members and good quality fintechs coming out of that. And that is very special in Europe. So that makes it a nice conference to go to.
Maybe a pivot to a European perspective on IFAs. Where are they most concentrated right now?
I guess if you look at the concentration of IFAs, you need to look at distribution of money. And if you look at from that perspective, then you can almost split Europe in beer Europe, liquid Europe, and wine Europe. And I think that's a nice way to sort of digest or dissect better the IFA industry in Europe. So if we look at beer Europe, where we are, there's a lot of wealth. It's traditional banking, private banking. So there's a better split between what are the rich and the poor. And there's a lot of middle class. So that's why traditionally have a lot of IFAs also in the industry. When you look at, for example, Luxembourg, look at Switzerland, Germany, they have a vast amount of IFAs in the industry. But also in my own market, Benelux, Belgium is very well presented, and also the Netherlands had historically a high number of IFAs. You see a lot of M&A, but that's something that's you see in all the markets. But if you then go maybe to liquid Europe, then you see that new wealth is forming, and that also means that there's new IFAs popping up. IFAs and family offices. But very often they start more from the mass affluent side, whereas maybe in the more traditional market, it's typically that private banker that suddenly says, I'm not going to longer work for the bank, I'm going to do it on my own, and then takes a good part of their clients with them. Whereas you see in the other countries or other regions, this is building up from the bottom up.
And maybe specific to business models then, how do they differ per region in your estimation?
Well, I don't think the business model is so different because there's always this tripartite sort of setup so that you always have a bank, the client, and the IFA. And that doesn't change. And the reason why it's not changing because that's basically how Europe has set up the way to work. That's within the MiFID rules. So it's the IFA that sort of takes responsibilities to know the clients and to make the right investment decisions for the client, well, depending on what type of model they are. So those, let's say, those lines to work in, they are the same. I guess what is the difference is how they do it and what type of client they are serving. If you start from a bottom up, it's easier to go with like new technology, new ways of connecting with your clients versus if you have always done it just by taking your client by matter of speech to the opera. Yeah, that's harder to digitalize.
So maybe regardless then of region, what are the top 3 challenges that all IFAs are facing right now?
Well, I think by far it's regulations, has been like that for the last 10, 15 years, and I don't think that will change. I think the other one is revenue models. Because of regulations, a lot of the work has to be done to stay afloat and to be within the realms of regulation. If you look at from a percentage view versus a bank, an IFA needs to adhere to a lot of these regulations, but it's a lot less people. Very often, a compliance team of a bank is larger than actually the IFA itself. So for that extent, these two go very close to each other. But also, if you look at the general terms of trading, I mean, if you look at the US, it's common sense that you have 0 trade fees. There is no fees when you do a trade. And this is rippling down also in Europe. So that's also something you need to compete to. You almost have to provide value to your clients, whereas the traditional model based on transactions is under pressure. So I think that these are the main challenges that they have. Yeah, no, I guess we can talk about later how we could overcome it, but I think an immediate result of these challenges is you hear a lot of M&A fever in the market. And that by itself also takes a lot of time for these IFAs, whereas I think the primary focus for an IFA is to be with the client. So maybe on its own it's a challenge that there's a lot of fever in the market, which you have to bring attention to, whereas at the end of the day, it's your client that should be in the middle of it.
I guess then from an IFA perspective, we hear a lot about this like generational transfer of wealth. It's coming, it's happening already, maybe in some cases. How is an IFA adapting their value proposition to a new generation of wealth clients?
Yeah, I would say there's two distinct ways of how this is happening. On one end, you see IFAs that go more for a factory approach. They have products based on ETFs and they make portfolios based on several ETFs or a combination, but something that's very scalable. So they're looking at how the younger generation is also served, not having to think too much about investing, because sometimes people say having a lot of money it's fine, but it's also a worry, it's a burden. You have to do something with this. So if there is a solution for this younger generation, and this is an easy solution, low in cost, often very highly digitalized, then this is an option. I think the other side is that the more traditional parties, they are looking at sort of going to a digital transformation themselves. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Well, this can be by offering a new type of technology, but it can also be by dealing with these clients differently. I used the example by the opera. I don't think you can please the younger generation with an opera. So you need to be you need to think about what actually floats the boat of that younger generation. And I think that's on its own is a challenge, not only because the audience is different, but also the IFAs. If you look at people working at an IFA, they are, statistically speaking, on an average basis, they are a little bit older. So I think that's also going to be the challenge for the IFA itself, is to start matching their personnel with the actual clients.
To kind of help build informed plans around, okay, we have this new wave value proposition that needs to impact our newer customers, and maybe they're not in the space to do that well, but then they need to hire out and start to build out an organization that reflects that generational transfer of wealth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that we're in a perfect situation, because that's something that I like a lot about IFAs and the industry in general, is an IFA actually still takes the time to speak to a client. So there is conversation. And I think this is what they need to cherish. And it doesn't really matter whether that's in an opera or it's actually done at a fair where you exchange clothes on a Sunday morning. It really doesn't matter, as long as this connection is there, and that takes time. And that's human connection. So if they can continue to do that, then I think they can easily take the wealth with them from the new generation.
All right, so the buzzword that goes round and round and round right now, AI, of course, it's a very, very important topic, but I think you also talk about operational excellence being just as important in some cases. Can you sort of unpack that
if
for
not
us?
more?
Yeah.
Because I think that AI cannot be seen as a mean. Right? It's not a must. I mean, that's what I mean. It's not a must, it's a mean. And what you see where the most successes are today in AI, generally in the financial industry, we all know that report that almost 90% of the proof of concepts fail. But those that actually work are those that are embedded in the operational flow. And yes, it's often agentic, but make it small enough so it adds value and you can trust it. If that's the case, and if that's the sort of spirit, and then if you then reflect this to an IFA, there's multiple possibilities to do that. Well, think about consolidation of your data. Why don't you have a sort of corrective agent that double checks that there are no breaks, for example? There's multiple things you can think about that an IFA can introduce using AI. However, I think for an IFA, it's also the most scary thing that is coming to them, because it's more complex to see it in real life. But there's so much hype that you almost say and hear and think AI will replace me. But I don't think that's the case yet. I mean, AI is not emotional intelligence yet, like a private banker is. But I think we'll need to follow up very closely, because AI will continue to evolve. And if you look at the speed it's evolving today, well, yeah, some say that emotion will be added in AI. So the question will be then, how will you take that on board? And how will you augment your journey that you have today with your client using various AI tools?
Yeah, I was in Zurich on Tuesday of this week talking to a customer sort of about this topic around AI. But one of the things that really struck me about what they want from like a technology solution like Performatives is like they want something that's radically competent. That was the term they used, radical competence in like the day-to-day. It needs to work every day that I'm using a system. And if you put AI bells and whistles inside of the solution, make sure that it makes it even more radically competent, not just a hollow feature that just sits there and I never use as an advisor. So that was actually really interesting to talk to them on from a customer level.
I understand, and that was a very good advice if you ask me, because it makes sense that if you want to stay future-proof as an IFA, I think that would be my number one advice, is to ensure that your foundation is laid out very structurally, correctly, data clean, so that whenever there's an opportunity, you can actually also benefit from the opportunity of AI.
I guess then with agentic AI, what risks do you see emerging for IFAs in that sense?
I guess the risk is that inevitably there will be solutions in the market that go probably one bridge too far, by maybe having an avatar as a financial advisor, having a chatbot that will provide you help and insights on your financial situation. And maybe it's also a good thing. But I think we have to be vigilant to ensure that the right content, the right advice is given to the end clients. And again, I'm not so sure if that emotional connection is so high than really talking with a human person. And specifically in situations where you talk about a lot of money, you talk about decisions that you need to make in your life, you want to have somebody knowledgeable next to you. And I'm not sure how that will go. On the other hand, I also believe that the mass affluent side would be also treated with skills and qualities that are coming from the high-end side. And they probably will be digitalized first. So it's also an opportunity, I think, for an IFA to start grabbing this new type of clientele of customers.
Maybe we can step one question back to dig more into operational excellence. In your view, having been from the space, having built out digital transformation projects in your previous life, and even now probably you're engaged in some, what does that actually look like in practice for a small independent firm?
It's not an easy answer, I believe. It looks different for everyone, but to come back, and I'm sorry if I'm repeat myself, but that foundational thing, that's the crucial part. You need to have a foundation to start building upon. If you have a house that's already not rightly in order and you have to put like buckets everywhere when it's raining, that's not gonna fly. So I don't think the urgency is like tomorrow you need that system, but don't wait too long, because now you have the opportunity to focus, get it done. And at the same token, I think we talked about M&A fever before. So far, a lot of this M&A fever has been happening within one region. And I think the next step that we'll see in the IFA landscape is that M&A fever will grow across borders, across regions. Because the bigger the size of an IFA will become, the more budget you have to invest in compliance and in tooling, and the more time you can bring to your clients. So I think this is the next step that will happen, which then also means that the house that you have needs to be solid and needs to support that international expansion that probably will come in the near future.
How much poking and prodding do you think the IFA space needs to sort of adopt newer ways of operational excellence? Because there's probably some firms that have been doing the same thing. It's been generally working for the last 15 to 20 years, but pretty soon it's going to catch up to them that whether it's technology or something else, they need to evolve. I assume that's a delicate conversation for one with IFAs, but how much prompting do they need right now? Are they very much on top of the fact that, yes, we need to make a change, we need to get better with this?
I honestly think that they're 100% on top of it, but it's a very topical discussion in that sense that we mentioned it early that in the IFA landscape, there are many companies, they are rather small, and maybe the director, the founder, the partners, they are also going to a retirement age and they take their clients. So there is no ambition to make radical changes. The ambition is to keep their clients happy and to have a happy life ever after, which is also fine. And I think there are a lot of them like this. You see with the more younger generation and the younger IFAs, no, they're strongly involved and they're strongly searching for ways to improve themselves and get on the ball wagon really to do digital innovation.
So what advice would you give IFAs who are looking to compete on user experience in particular against larger institutions that maybe have bigger budget, more resources? Like how do they compete effectively against the larger competitors?
Well, the answer is super simple. It's technology. There's no other answer here. It's just to make sure that you're working with the top-notch technology that by its own, as a technology provider, puts the client in the middle. If that's the case, then you're off for a good streak and you actually have the speed and nimbleness from being small versus the big Goliath as the bank. So I think that's the way you need to play it. If I would be playing poker, all in on this.
So if an IFA was just starting its journey towards digital and operational excellence or transformation, whatever you want to call it, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them to start out with?
Do your homework very thoroughly. That's very important. Go in the market, go and learn. Take your time to do it because, as we mentioned before, at least in my opinion, it's your building block, it's your reason for success going forward.
So when you look forward to 2030, what does the future of IFAs look like across Europe?
I think the answer is already in the question, and that's across Europe. I think that will be a much more European view on the market and how the market is served. So that's definitely one of them. Another thing that's obviously happening is that wealth is transferring from the older to the younger generation. So I think that's going to be a challenge to continue to capture that new wealth, as well as the mass affluent. That with technology, if you choose your stack wisely, then potentially you can also start getting new customers or new prospects in a new way of working. And I think that's how IFA land will look like in 2030.
Fantastic. And maybe we can end with one question, like what's next for the connector? What are you guys excited about moving forward?
We are the most exciting, and I'm realizing that I'm only giving one-liners as an answer today. We are most exciting about connecting, because the world is so much changing around AI, and I'm very convinced that what actually is really valuable is human conversations. And I'm very happy that with the company that I created and now are creating with many others is based upon having conversations with people. And I'm in a very good zone that I can travel. I can meet a lot of people. I meet a fantastic amount of entrepreneurs with innovative ideas. But I'm also meeting the buy side. I'm also meeting the financial institutions looking and trying to adopt. So it's a very interesting world around us, and I'm very excited to be part of it.
Maybe a follow-up then to the last question of what you're excited about. I'm curious, when you mentioned you're meeting a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, are you having to ground them in the reality of that, like something like AI is an augmentation play and not a replacement, that it still is about human connection? Like, what are you getting back from the market there?
It depends on the conversation. If it's with VCs, then everything is AI.
Yeah.
And the new products are all over the place is AI. It's almost, many of the times it's fake AI, but it's a branding nowadays. So that's one part. The other part is that most of the founders that I speak to today, they know very well what are the capabilities of AI. And if they're not so much in the AI space, then I think it's important that a founder or a new company knows exactly what problem they are solving. And then maybe they made a very conscious choice and decision that AI is not necessarily part of their roadmap. So I come across a lot of people that are very AI savvy, if I can say it that way.
Fantastic. Koen, let's end there. Thank you so much for joining today. It's been a pleasure, and we'll look to have you back here another time.
Likewise, and thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. That's it for today's episode of Wealth Insider. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find more insight on performative.com, and we'll be back soon with more conversations from the people redefining wealth management.